everybody, Leslie with Moxxi Coffee and the Moxxi Women's Foundation, and today I am going to be chatting with Fawn Montanye. Thank you very much for joining us today, Fawn.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So Fawn was nominated as a Fearless Female by one of our former Fearless Females, Jem. And so could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you think that you might have been nominated for this?
I can't imagine any one reason. I just know that I try to help, drop other people's name in the right rooms. And I hope that does for other people what it's done for me, in my personal life and my professional life. So I hope that coming together, and much like what you've done with Moxxi, Leslie, bringing women together. I hope that that's one of the contributing variables to why I might have been nominated. When I lived in the Saratoga Springs area, there was a couple of, powerful networks of women starting to pop up, but then also kind of culminate and attract to one another. And it was really, really lovely to see. And during that time, I was transitioning professionally from a more corporate career to one in the nonprofit space. And it was just really nice to come into.
So can you tell us a little bit about what your role in that nonprofit space looked like?
I had the privilege, after working for a short time at Saratoga Economic Opportunity Council, to be on the pioneering team of the Healing Springs Outreach and Community Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. It was the first recovery community and outreach center Saratoga Springs had seen. We had a very active community group called Recovery Advocacy in Saratoga that worked together with the Prevention Council of Saratoga to bring the center forward, and were actually awarded a grant that was quite substantial, covering 6 counties and allowing 3 centers to be opened and pop up. So I was at our flagship center in Saratoga Springs, and we went from 0 people and just a handful of help to realizing about 130 volunteers in the first month.
Wow.
And seeing operational hours of 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, and even opening in the midnight hour for the kids to have a fellowship meeting at the midnight hour. And it was just a tremendous community that came together in the first year that I was there.
That's amazing. What prompted the transition from corporate to nonprofit?
That would be my own personal recovery and lived experience.
Okay.
At the height of my corporate career, when I thought I was doing my best as a single, independent woman who had just invested in herself and had always been a single mom of 2 really, really remarkable kids, I had gastric bypass surgery. And within a year, became a full-blown alcoholic, and
fast.
really, really fast. It really accelerated before anybody's eyes, and the amount of control that was lost took me to a place where, I'm thankful for where I am today, and every experience that I've had that's gotten me here. But it's been a long road, and it came with losing, not just my job, my kids, my house, my dignity, a lot of professional relationships and contacts, and having to, really start at, point zero and rebuild in my mid-30s. Right back, to where it is that I find myself today. And, I have a reunified family and a beautiful family in recovery. And I've been working in the nonprofit space, helping recovery community organizations professionally develop. and really transition from being charities to nonprofit organizations that are worth investing in and having in the community. But it came after my own personal experience.
What are some of your accomplishments in this nonprofit sector that you're most proud of?
Most recently, I was really happy to be the recipient of an awarded grant for the state of Vermont for $515,000, which was the largest, the entity that I was working at the time that it was awarded. I was, privileged to be a part of the authoring team on. And that was just substantial to be in this space after managing a federal grant award and the state grant award and a state database transfer and all these things I was doing in my everyday duties, to also have this award approved for this amount because of the corporate nature of what I saw for the nonprofit community. And it really took the idea of having a leadership academy for people coming up in the field of peer-based recovery to have an opportunity to become professionalized and work with the state and the grants and understanding where core funding comes from, and then how to diversify and sustain in meaningful ways so that they would be an everlasting part of their community.
Wonderful. So that was what that large grant was for, was to pioneer a program for peer-to-peer advocacy?
Yes.
Wonderful. Are you overseeing that?
I stepped away from that organization in 2021.
Okay.
And, stepped into another organization that I was a board member of. And that was actually to take it a step further and really deal with the population of individuals involved with treatment court in the state of Vermont. And I felt that it was an underrepresented, underfunded, underutilized, really, really useful tool that represented social justice, reform, correct utilization of community-based services, but really investing in peer-to-peer recovery for that 18 to 24 months that we know is needed to help people rebuild and actually live their life in a new way before we expect, that they just, have it all and in 90 days can just, be free to do it on their own. Treatment court here in Vermont is under the judiciary, so it's not available in all regions. That was one of our legs, was to bring equity and make it statewide. And right before leaving this position in August, I was on the authoring team, and we were awarded $15,000 from the Ben and Jerry's Social Justice and Equity Fund out of Waterbury.
Wonderful. What's happening with those funds? Do you know?
They will be directed towards what they were intended to do, which will be participant support and program quality. So those funds are unduplicated funds. And when somebody hits a barrier with being able to participate with treatment court, their case manager can make an appeal for direct funds to help out with that. We have a mission to help people with dental care. If somebody is getting back into the career force and they need dental work, that would be an option. Housing expenses for sober housing are just crazy at this point in time, and limitations of space. So really any barrier to accessing treatment or participating in anything. So we do a lot for parents in recovery, helping out if there's a way to help with childcare, any resource that the case management team can come to us and say, this person would like to be there, this is what's preventing them from doing it. A CV joint in a car is, often a very legitimate call that we will get when it's a 50-mile trip to and from where you're going in rural Vermont, and there's no funds available to fix the car that you have, and because you have a car, you can't qualify for a Medicaid ride or another subsidy.
Oh wow, yeah. There's a lot of limitations that happen within the system, I feel like. Yeah, it's definitely not been perfected yet, but we're still working on it, right?
There is always hope, and there are opportunities to come together on regular occurrences.
I recently heard a phrase that is often associated with recovery, and it is we recover loudly so that those behind us don't have to suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that kind of your path over the course of the last few years really embodies that, and that's kind of what you're trying to accomplish with your personal path?
Right. It's an interview dedicated to women, right? So here was my position. I knew I had to make a choice in rehab in the halfway house when I was navigating going back to work because I had to start rebuilding a resume. And the choice was right then and there. Was I going to keep my recovery, this hidden part of my life, and not let any of my coworkers or the interview team or anybody aware, know that alcoholism and dependency on pharmaceuticals in any way were a part of my life and that I was in recovery from these things? Why was that going to be a secret? I had to at least make that choice for me. And people have to choose for themselves what works in their life. And for me, I didn't want to live a dual life. I knew that I was going to be not quiet. We have addiction in my family. We have, cycles and different things. And I didn't want to keep quiet. I didn't want to make that something. I hid so much when I was an active alcoholic and all the things that came with that. From a lifestyle perspective of where, your behaviors take you in that place, that I was really proud to be able to say that consuming alcohol isn't something that I do at all. There's reasons behind that, and I'm a different person today, and I'm a better person. I'm a better person to hire. So for me, it was a professional decision then to know that I was going to recover out loud professionally, because in my personal life, my passions had become advocating for other people who didn't have a voice. So that had nothing to do with the fellowship that I was in or any kind of treatment that I was partaking in to get myself well or to remain well. But I found a voice in advocating for other women and other families who were overcoming their struggles and the potential they had and the contributing factors that they also offered their communities. I know I'm not a liability.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh. Slight interruption. So you made mention of Google wants me to update my listing again. Sorry about that. So you made mention of having been associated with a program that was dealing with some of the issues involved in drug court. What's happening there now? Are you still with this organization?
No, I had a hybrid role, and it was really great. I was working not only with the nonprofit entity that I most recently left, but along with that, a public benefits company in Vermont that was a supportive employment company. And I've recently separated with both of them, and I separated in mid-August, over some ethical conflicts, if you will, and things that I just, didn't know were going on and couldn't be a part of.
Do you care to elaborate on some of those ethical conflicts at all?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm intentionally not mentioning, company names or individual names because this isn't being brought up, in any way to harm. It's, the fact of the matter is, that I'm hoping more people will use their voice to help others. I was blatantly put in a situation where I unknowingly was representing somebody who had been convicted of sex offenses under 18, and represented that, in their second chance employment opportunity, that they were, ultimately going to be face to face with sexually victimized people, and people that were in very vulnerable places in their lives. And as a survivor of sexual victimization myself, I felt very violated that I was knowingly informed that I was supervising people who had sex offenses in their history, and doing so without issue. However, the coworker that I was being sent out of state to support and be an ambassador of, I was never informed. And it was really damaging, to say the least. And there has been a few hard weeks that we've just, really pushed through. Personally, me, to, go through what it's brought up, then professionally, to separate employment, to be actively looking for, a position when I had just started one. But to know that the non-monetary ask of improved policy amongst, practice and the organizations that you partner with, was declined, that was alarming.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me like it's possible to advocate for victims of sexual abuse or survivors of sexual abuse in that position that you were put in.
I disagree. I actually, from a position of social reform and social justice, there's many contributing factors. And when we look at anyone who has a sex offense on their background, it's not an automatic disqualifier. There's many levels and different things. And the most often one that comes to mind is, I think about these scenarios when you have an 18-year-old man who is carrying a lifelong offense and something on his registry because he was with a girl who was 16 or 17. And perhaps, it was supported at one point in time and the families were okay, but life is life. And this person wound up, in a situation where they were over 18 and this was the outcome.
Yep. There
are other scenarios, and this is why everybody gets a second chance. And, when you present and you're looking to rebuild your life and you say what you're doing and how you want to do it, and there's a level of transparency, there's a level of accountability, and there's some, different roles and placements for people. A person who's an account manager in this position is in my view, something parallel to an intake coordinator. Where you're receiving personal information, you're not in a supervised capacity, you're one-on-one with an individual, and it may be the same sex or the opposing sex. A person who might have offended 10 years ago and has had 10 years to live in our communities and prove. I won't belittle and mince words, but prove that they've rebuilding their lives authentically, and doing meaningful things, and doing it in a way that blends is very different than having a recent offense and not having those same opportunities to even reintegrate. And I don't know the background, but I know what I read as the offense, and I know that isn't somebody that I would, in any capacity, when I was a peer coach or when I was the director of a recovery center, that I would feel comfortable sending someone that I was working with to go and sit with for a job.
Well, without the transparency, there is no choice, and when choice is taken away, that's a problem.
That was the absolute pinnacle, and that was in my email to my employer as we were going through all this, was I didn't understand why I was being informed 4 months later when I was actually working to design services for sex offenders that we served in their second chance employment roles in manufacturing facilities or any placements where, we had the opportunity to allow people to go and have a fair chance at a second chance employment opportunity. And with that, when you work for this company, you got peer coaching once a week for an hour a week. And as the director of the peer support team, we have to have appropriate supports in place and tools. So it's my job to make sure that we're supporting people appropriately. And when somebody has probation and parole criteria that coaches should be informed of to ensure that they're, helping the person they're coaching comply with, perhaps it would be, beneficial to have some information from domestic violence and other, professionals that deal and have trauma-informed services to see how coaches could best be doing their job to support an offender who's looking to do the things that they're being asked to do, which is socialize and get involved with things, and how to do that and be socially responsible. And it was only at that point that I was told a coworker was, a factor to be considered in how I was designing things. And it was 4 months after I was hired. It was 2 trips after being out of state and in a car alone with somebody, and reporting back both times, behaviorally, and something was amiss, and I wasn't comfortable, and I was trying to figure out how we could support this individual do a better job at the job that they were doing, because that's what I was sent to do, and not being transparently told why there might have been some anxiety, why, there would be the behaviors that I experienced happening, rather than giving me the choice. Because it's like I told them at the beginning, we would have been in a completely different situation had I been told at the onset upon hire, as a member of the leadership team, here's who you work with, and no different than anything that I've ever expected or done for the teams that I work with. It's just mind-blowing to me that asking for more transparency, and if you say that this is what you're doing as a business, and you say that your full team supports this and your full team doesn't know, that goes against, and to be, asked to just, keep somebody's confidentiality and their dignity, at the foremost, after sharing, that it has damaged me in such a way, given my lived experience and how I've been treated personally and professionally, and in my lens.
Yeah, it sounds like there is the potential for a lot of damage to be done without transparency.
Well, and I also learned in recovery, and I think it bothers me most because I work with people in recovery and on leadership teams with people in recovery, that when somebody that has harmed us approaches us and shares the harm that's done, you don't get to say, no, I didn't. And that happened not once, but twice. And that's the position that I'm left in. And so I forget about severance and, anything to personally go and all of that kind of stuff is so superficial. And trying to change one person's mind about the fact that harm was done, I would much rather dedicate the time and energy to bringing light to the issue, that we have practices in place at organizations that peer-driven service-providing organizations are unaware of. And in my 6 years of professional experience, I've never had to develop a business agreement or a memorandum of understanding and build in the criteria of asking what the hiring practices are of the partnering organization.
Yeah. So where is that leaving you now?
with an unemployment check, the not ability to generate any kind of, side hustle, if you will, like single moms are kind of accustomed to doing, actively pursuing where I can align myself professionally at this point in time, and exercising everything in my practice that has taught me that the right thing will come at the right time. And I'm supposed to be where I am right now. I'm supposed to be talking to you and not keeping quiet like I was told. That was important to me. I know my house is being sold. There's a bear tearing apart my shed. My transmission's leaking. I could pity party it up, and I'm super grateful. I had every one of these things to list and the opportunity to talk about it today in continuous recovery. Not having to be a mom that needs a Cosmo or my favorite bottle of Kim Crawford, and bring light to the fact that, we have a number of opportunities before us to allow people to do better just by knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I think that it's really important too to show more people and pave the way for using your voice and not keeping quiet about a lot of different things, because I think that we are conditioned to not making waves, taking the easier way, staying quiet, at the threat of how difficult things can be if you don't. So I very, very much admire that you have decided to use your voice with so much integrity, that this isn't about, making it clear that it's not about severance, and it's not about necessarily exposing an entity specifically for wrongdoings, but just a general overall message of, when you see something that is not comfortable for you, not only to advocate for yourself, but to advocate for all of us.
It's really difficult, Leslie, when this is the second time now, because I did it in the space of recovery before I left a previous organization and supported multiple centers and recovery organizations together, but now I'm doing it again. And it just, you become the spokesperson and you make the stance, and everybody agrees this is wrong, this shouldn't have happened, but then you blow the whistle and there's nobody there to answer.
Yeah.
There's nobody there at the local level. There's nobody there at a regional level. There's nobody there at the state level. There's nobody there at the private level. So, great. Now we've raised issue to this, and it goes on your YouTube, and I push it out on social media a little bit. And what happens now? How many organizations are going to revisit their policy and procedure manual and, take a pulse on their organizational wellness and bring their staff bodies in for an in-service and talk about practices and procedures, not pointing any fingers or pointing anybody out. And I mean, in general, what is, if we say we have a team culture or an organizational culture and that we value the team members, how are we showing them that? And what organizations are going to come together and revisit their business agreements and their memorandums of understanding and go through line by line and start doing a proper risk analysis and acting like nonprofit entities and not like charitable grassroots organizations that just don't have to do this because they're just doing the best they can. The fact is that this is going on. We know that whether an offender, anybody, it's so difficult because people that get caught aren't, every day. Like there's a big enough problem with people that we don't know about, and then we know about who we know about. So, there's some things to take into consideration. And then, from that, we have the benefit of learning about people. And we know that with certain offenders and certain categories of people, just like treatment court is meant for one classification of people who would do best in that program. There's certain contributing factors to sex offenders who groom people, who collect information, who have practices embedded in its behavioral that need to be taken into consideration and kind of weighed out. And we have to, I'm not articulating well because my emotions are getting, a little riled up over what's occurred. But to bring it back to being infidelity to those that we serve, ensuring that if we have practices in place that we're transparent with the people that we serve and the people that fund us.
Yeah, I think that's, to me that sounds like a very reasonable ask that should be asked and required of pretty much any entity doing anything, is just for transparency in what you're doing so that people can make choice and safeguards for the people that they either employ, serve, or both. I'm surprised that with a nonprofit that's dedicated to serving others, that they wouldn't be more compelled to put in some safety measures, even if it was something that, it doesn't sound like it was maybe super intentional, but maybe just, something that slipped through the cracks, and mistakes happen and things, get to a certain point. But when it's been pointed out to you, maybe just acknowledge, address.
Well, it's and that's kind of where I saw the opportunity to come, because I do want to clarify the company that I've left is a public benefits corporation, and there's people investing in this corporation, and it's private and it serves the public, and it serves the public by developing relations with service providing nonprofits. So even more importantly, being an investor-led entity, you would, hope again that your investors were as clear on your policies and practices and as supportive of them as the employees. And there's no, again, problem. There would be no problem hiring a workforce that supported the same and aligned with every value that the leadership team wanted. You could absolutely design and build that. There's nothing restricting that. But I know for me, that wasn't what happened. I know for coworkers that I know there that I shared why I left with, they weren't informed of. And I know from the emails that I've received from leadership that there will not be any change in practice, along with my ask. And so that's exactly where it can stay. I'm much more concerned about ensuring that other people who are providing services, who have a tremendous amount of things to think about in the course of any day when they're providing critical services to very vulnerable people, the last thing they need to think about is, as I'm driving this person to an appointment or when I'm sending them alone to go meet with somebody, can I potentially put them in harm's way?
So if there were, if we were to be speaking directly to a population who is utilizing services, what types of questions are there? Any questions that people can be informed to ask so that they might then gain information that's not being given to them transparently?
In this situation, I would say it goes right back to just asking, directly about what your hiring practices are. And, with any nonprofit that I've operated with, background checks are the norm. And with a background check, it's not a disqualifier, but there's a criteria of what's acceptable. And if you're going to be doing business with a new business partner, I now will be much more upfront and inquiring about what their hiring practices are, because I have no say or knowledge about who they feel is qualified and what criteria equates to them being in any position that would impact those that I am serving.
Yeah, I think that's probably an important question for anybody to ask any employer in or outside of nonprofit if they have trauma in their past that could be triggered by the knowledge of what a particular coworker may or may not have in their own past. So I think it's very, very good to, get the knowledge out there, that it's a good thing to ask, to be aware that maybe these organizations and entities aren't being quite as forthright as they should be, and to advocate, always continue to advocate for yourself, always continue to advocate for others, always stand up and use your voice when there's injustice, and do our part in raising awareness. And hopefully, maybe at some point in time we can work towards there actually being an entity that will check these people, or a note to investors to take a deeper dive into some of the practices that are happening within these nonprofits that they're donating to. Moxxi Women's Foundation, you want to see what I've got going on? It's not much. It's a pretty straight line, but I'm happy to be transparent with it. So thank you very much for sharing, the situation that you found yourself in, so that others can be informed.
That is absolutely the message, is sharing information and hopefully seeing improvement, continuous quality improvement. That's something that's embedded, and should be embedded in any leader. I don't care what their title is in an organization, but, that strive of continuous quality improvement. And, my issue is when your product is people, the standard can't just be cookie cutter and run of the mill and just good enough. That just doesn't cut it. And when your product is vulnerable people.
Well, don't you think that's kind of why we're here? Like, in this place where there are so many, and I'm just starting to learn the number of things that I've began to learn about by embarking on this journey of let me interview people. It's put me into diving into worlds outside of my own. And I have some things that are recurring, and a lot of the things that are recurring is the number of people in recovery, the number of services that are out there for recovery, the number of people who are, quote unquote, awakening to a more conscious level of seeing that we have been going through this life in a cookie cutter fashion, which is accelerating burnout and distance and separation, and it's just insane. And I feel like it is that cookie cutter process. And where did it start? Did it start in the 60s with mass production of everything, and all of these developments where literally all of the houses look the same, and all of the clothing looks the same, and all of the cars look the same, and
so if you trace it back, it goes back to a social services derived root, because when you look at what you're talking about, it correlates directly back to when did people become units of service.
Okay.
I have a whole other soapbox of this, that we all, once we enter into a data set driven, trackable system, that's what census is. That's why you can check male or female on a US box, and it took so long to get other put on there, because you're dealing with standardized data sets, and the only way people have to collect data is on survey and analysis. And again, these are humans. So in the space of recovery, I mean, God forbid you're a single mom that wants abstinence-based recovery and you don't want to be on social services. I mean, try to find some help there. I don't have anything for you, me, or the next person, because that's the path that I'm on. However, if I'm a mom on MAT, and I have to go to the clinic and get my, prescriptions and participate in other treatments and therapies. And my doctors don't ever want me to be off the lowest dose of what I'm on. And they say that, medication is a part of life and I need this forever. Well, then I know I'm probably going to live in the same neighborhood and my kids are going to have this kind of upbringing. And it's kind of destined to be in one way or another. But, the cookie cutter approach came to the shift to community-based services, deinstitutionalization, and shifting, the urban spread.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Could you just clarify, because I don't know what MAT is?
Medication assisted treatment, which is also now called medication assisted recovery. And, when Suboxone and some of these other, supports were introduced, it was supposed to be to help people, get through withdrawal symptoms and be a short-term help, which has now become a very long-term in the science and everything. I'm not a doctor. I'm not somebody who takes these things, but in the space of peer-based recovery, this is a lot of what is seen. It's September. It's National Recovery Month. People absolutely need medicated assisted treatment to begin their path of recovery if that's where they find themselves. I can speak for myself and peers who have found their way as I did. And I'll tell you, when I was in rehab and going into a halfway house, the deal was, you better have me off of absolutely everything. I don't want to ever have to consume anything again to be normal or live, because I had an issue with alcohol and prescribed medications before.
Gotcha. That's not, would you say that's the, I don't want to say typical, statistically, do a lot of people go that path with getting off of everything, or do you see it being more weighted towards long-term medically assisted recovery?
It really, it's varied, and it's regrettably, the what I see today is a lot of people on long-term care and providers not giving the option or a plan to become abstinent, just like people are not given from a provider level any information about what other recovery supports and services are available outside of the medical practice. And, when we come into recovery, the only thing that has to change is everything. And there's a lot of hours in a day. And when we don't have people and activities and supports in our life to start doing different things with different people and learning new ways, it's very easy. And especially in a lot of our rural communities and without transportation and people who rely on a lot of social services, it's hard for me, and I'm taking the position that I am because I ask people today in my role, how long have you been in recovery? And they say, well, I don't know, I've been on Suboxone for like 3 months. Like, there's no differentiation about, are you in recovery? Are you on medication? And I live a firm rule. Like, you're in recovery when you say you're in recovery. I did no kickback from me at all. I don't care your pathway, if it's moderation, if it's medicated assisted treatment, if it's abstinence, it's your life and your path. I just don't think people are being given an opportunity to pursue any path, very far, because they're so regulated when it is assisted by medication. And there's not enough light being drawn to the different opportunities that we have in recovery. And forget about in recovery, just in non-consuming activities. There's, a whole space of people who have decided that, drinking just isn't something that they want to do these days. And, not everything has to be a paint and stuff. It's really hard, in when you're dealing with social determinants and in areas that are depressed, when you're trying to give people new things to do without appropriate community supports that are vibrant, thriving, and active, and when we don't have thriving recovery communities attracting people to come and see what we've got and what's going on over here, it minimizes, what is available, and really limits the individual to, how much they can thrive. Because if we could do it ourselves, we would. That term self-help group has been abandoned for mutual aid for a reason. We have to do it for ourselves, and we have to get up and go to the mutual aid meetings if that's our pathway, or we have to go to the gym, or we have to go to our medical appointment and then do the things that we told our therapist we were going to do as part of the medicated assisted recovery that we're doing. But when it's just, take a pill and call it a day, when's the last time your provider asked you if you were happy? What would make your life better today? Do you enjoy the life you live?
Yeah, and I wonder, and I'm not sure the answer of this, but I wonder if there's even a crossover from, one medical doctor that you're seeing for one issue versus another medical doctor that you're seeing for another issue, and, communication between the two of what's even really going on, because, if I'm going to one doctor and I'm getting medically, I'm never going to be help me out here.
If you're getting MAT,
there we go.
Yeah.
If you're getting MAT from this one doctor, but you're going to another doctor and, they're not informed of what your other processes are, it doesn't seem like that's going to work either, because they don't have all of the information.
No, comprehensive care teams are really, it's a luxury privilege. And even if you have coordinated insurance, like through MVP or Blue Cross Blue Shield, even if you live in New York State and on your Medicaid, you're enrolled in the HARP program, which is for, people who utilize services more than others. A care management team and a case management team is very hard to come by. My son has had 2 brain tumors removed, and even getting his care team together was like, moving the earth for something not significant. There's not a lot of practitioners in the space of community and human services that are going to come together to see if the dentist prescribed hydrocodone to somebody who's taking Suboxone or on something else. Now, I just had a tooth extracted this week, and I, went in and I informed my doctor, and I said, this is my history. These are the things I cannot have. This is what I need. He was great. But he had questions, like he had to ask me, why can't you take this? And often we become educators and advocates as we find our recovery for ourselves and our family members.
I mean, that sounds really important to me, to educate. And I guess what I don't understand is, why aren't these people with all these letters after their name with the ability to prescribe these things already educated?
The college hasn't changed in the schooling, so you can approach it for that route. I would go right to, regulatory authorities and say, that would be like my congressional ask at this point in time, is, some kind of mandate that, everybody with a current practice within, the next 2 years has to have X number of education specifically in addiction and recovery. Like, end all of this garbage, arguments and how the grant funded process works in this state versus that state. There's a van that just left Nevada that's going across the country this month. It's literally called Mobilize Recovery, to bring information literally across the country, all the way to Maine, in areas, because the states and blame whoever you want to, chalk it up to whatever. We lose more people a day to overdose and alcohol related, substance use related matters than anything. The amount of money our emergencies rooms go through because people don't believe in clean needle exchange. oh, if you give somebody a clean needle, you're endorsing they can use heroin. No, I'm endorsing that they're going to use heroin anyways, and I'm trying to prevent them from having a blood infection that's going to cost taxpayers $300,000 when they're admitted into the emergency department.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think, because that's definitely a hot button issue. I think one of the things that's the most disappointing, let me count the ways, to say that it's not feasible or affordable to get these types of trainings in the hands of these people that need it just blows my mind. I mean, I know, and I don't know where it's progressed, but I believe it's the state of Massachusetts for hairstylists, which I was a hairstylist prior to all of this stuff. They have to go through domestic violence training as part of their maintaining their license. And I know New York was talking about it at one point in time. I know that it's offered, but I don't think it's been mandatory. But I mean, if they can put something like that together for a hairstylist, our certifications aren't nearly as, we don't have people's lives in the balance, maybe just their confidence. Why is it so difficult? I mean, there are so many different, it's already been recognized that hairstylists can be like a first point of contact. They get comfortable in your chair. They talk to you. It made perfect sense to incorporate that kind of training. And I, for one, was one who was willing, absolutely, I need to go through this as a victim of domestic violence myself. Why aren't you, it seems like it is a no-brainer to train.
You asked, what more could we do? And somebody said, here, you could do this. And you said, I'll be the first one. Right?
Yeah.
There are so many products out there and programs that it's all, bureaucracy. And so, I learned early on in the private company that I loved and, built every good thing about me that, innovation has to trump bureaucracy. And you have to, push through, and that you can't compromise quality, and that, people come first.
Yeah. Well, I really, really hope, and I feel like I see it myself, because the deeper I get into this, Moxxi Women's Foundation journey, the more I'm being exposed to these, very small grassroots, hand-to-mouth organizations that I think are doing a lot of good. And so long as we continue to have individuals like yourself stepping up and continuing to advocate and continuing to raise awareness to some of these issues of, larger corporations, larger nonprofits that are maybe not doing the job that they were set out to do in the best way that they could. We're going to see more and more of us stepping up and doing more. And we're making noise, we're using our voice, and we're going to just continue to advocate just louder and louder and louder until they listen.
At some point, my daughter's lost enough this year, as has yours, in terms of our rights. At some point, the girls are going to have their day. And, I hope that, those that are present for it, do it as women of integrity and dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we lead by example. And
yes, we do.
And that's, that's the best that we can do. So I'm very happy to, be on the personal path that I am for myself, as well as to be able to have a platform for, women such as you to use their voice. And we're going to push this as far and as wide as we possibly can. And thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm just very grateful for you taking up the issue and giving a platform to the cause and all that you do and that Moxxi Women's Foundation is doing for women in the Capital Region and beyond.
Thank you. We're excited to We're excited to be here. Every day we're gaining. The momentum is real, and expansion is on the horizon. So the the more the more noise we make, the farther our reach is. So we're all doing it together. You know,
Absolutely.
if it weren't for your willingness to sit here, then it also wouldn't happen. So, you know, that's what we're doing. We're just gonna all band together until the difference is actually seen and realized in real time. So.
That's it.
Well, I wish you the
Thanks
best
for
of luck in
the
your future endeavors. I know that whatever it is comes to you in its proper time will be amazing, and you know, you'll get back out there helping more people on their paths, I'm sure.
I have strong faith today, and I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. So fear is not on my radar. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity and your time, Leslie. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk again soon.
All righty.